welcome to another historical fiction author chat. And please welcome to the stage my guest for today, Iona Whishaw. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, everyone.
I'm so excited to have you here. And I'm
excited to be here.
We were chatting, and we're going to talk a lot. This is what Iona's here, not the advanced reader copy. We'll cross that part out. This is her new book coming out today, April 25. Oh, that looks better than mine. So, we got a lot to talk about, but it's great. I really, really enjoyed it. So entertaining. So this one is called To Track a Traitor. And I'm going to read to you Iona's bio and then the synopsis, and then I will disappear, as I always do at that point. Then we'll chat. So here we go, Iona. All right, Iona Whishaw has been a youth worker, social worker, teacher, and an award-winning high school principal who continued with her writing throughout her working life. Receiving her master's in creative writing from UBC, Iona has published short fiction, poetry translation, and one children's book, Henry and the Cow Problem. The Lane Winslow mystery series is her first foray into adult fiction, but this is number 10 of that series. Iona was born in Kimberley, BC, but grew up in a number of different places, including a small community on Kootenai Lake, as well as Mexico and Central America and the US. She took a degree in history and education from, I always pronounce this wrong, Antioch? And how do you say it? Antioch? Okay, good.
Antioch, perfect.
Antioch College, writing at UBC, and pedagogy at Simon Fraser University. During the course of her career as a principal in Vancouver, she was awarded the Woman of Distinction in Education by the YWCA in 2010, congratulations, and a Canada's Outstanding Principals Award in 2012. Her hobbies have included dance, painting, reading, and gardening. Is that your painting in the back?
No, it's my husband's. He's an actual, genuine, real artist.
I don't know. I like those. They're just beautiful. Maybe I should be talking to him. Anyway, she currently is a vocalist for a small Balkan dance band in Vancouver and is patiently waiting for her next opportunity to engage in her current passion, long-distance cross-country rambling in England. Oh. She is married, has one son and two grandsons, and lives in Vancouver with her artist husband, Terry Miller. I love that. You could travel across England. Are you going to do that?
Oh, yes. We're going in September.
Oh, God. All right. To Track a Traitor. With events spanning both world wars, the 10th installment in the Lane Winslow mystery, which first began with the best-selling adventure A Killer in King's Cove series, is a transatlantic tale of sibling rivalry, infidelity, and espionage. It's an early morning in May when Lane is pulled from a deep sleep by a concerning phone call from Scotland. Her grandfather has had a heart attack. Lane hastily makes plans to fly overseas, and a dejected Inspector Darling prepares himself for a stint of bachelorhood. But before he can begin to dwell on it, the Nelson police learn that Ben Arden, a local cad, has gone out for a late-night boat ride and not returned, which immediately sets the town rumor mill churning. In Scotland, Lane finds her grandfather on the mend, but her estranged sister Diana caught up in stressful and mysterious circumstances of her own. As Lane follows the thread leading from South Africa to Aberdeen to the War Office in London, it becomes apparent that her sister is on the run, and that keeping secrets seems to be a Winslow family trait. Back at the Nelson police station, a strange assemblage of clues begins to amass around the Arden case, stretching from the local print shop all the way back to the Great War. But progress is interrupted when the mayor himself issues a demand that Darling travel to England to tie up a decades-old mystery with local connections. True to form, upon Darling's arrival in London, he is quickly swept up in Lane's mission, which threatens to endanger the entire family. And they're adorable together. But you already know that. They're just so cute. All right. So they're very, very cute. And so now I'm going to disappear and throw it over to you. Thank you again.
All right. What I'll do is read you just the basics of what sets off this book, the groundwork, the framework for the mysteries in this book, if I can. Prologue, August 1917. I have killed her. She stood in the doorway asking me what I was doing there. Me. She was always a mistake from the very beginning. I only meant to strike her so she could understand what she'd done, but then I felt a blackness come over me. I don't think I even thought. When I looked down, she was dead. It was done. I beg your forgiveness. I know I must turn myself in, but it is possible I will not survive the next battle. That would be best, I know. Remember me as I was. The letter fluttered to the floor, face up. Though he could still see the words, he stared uncomprehendingly, as if the document itself were an alien presence. He closed his eyes, moving his fingers convulsively, as if trying to understand why they stopped working, why they were unable to hold even a slim piece of paper. Chapter 1, May 5th, 1948. Even from a deep dream of a phone ringing, Lane knew the call to be for them. 2 longs and a short. Pitying the 2 other households on her party line who had woken up only to find the call was not for them, she dragged herself awake and looked toward the slightly open window. The chill night air was seeping in, and she saw that it was still dark. What time was it? She cast an accusatory glance at Darling, apparently in the grip of a profound and undisturbed slumber. Who would call at this time of night but someone alerting him to an emergency? 2 longs and a short, repeated the phone in the hall. She threw the blankets off, not bothering with her dressing gown. She would shortly wake her husband to deal with whatever it was, and went into the hall to pull the earpiece off the hook of her ancient phone. KC 431, Lane Winslow speaking. You have a long-distance call. Please hold. Shivering and puzzled, she leaned against the wall, looking toward the bedroom, where Darling's bedside lamp had suddenly come on. The floor was freezing. Long distance wouldn't be for him. Feeling some regret at the lost opportunity to make him get up in the cold, she waited. Go ahead, please, Scotland, said an operator, who for all Lane knew was somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic. Lanica, is that you? It's Grandmama. Lane felt a surge of worry. What time would it be over there? And why would she be calling? Grandmama, hello, yes, it's me. Did I wake you? I'm so bad at the times. You can wake me any time. It's almost morning. Is everything all right? How is Gumph? Well, that is the thing, my angel. He's fine now, but he's had a little heart attack. They have him in the teeny hospital in the town for a few days. Dr. Mwangi has him well in hand. I didn't want to worry you, but I thought you should know. Lane ignored her grandmother's wishes altogether. She was worried. Oh, you should have called. We could have fretted together. When will he be able to go home? The doctor says he can come home on Friday. You really mustn't worry. I can hear it in your voice. He'll just have to be a little careful now. Take his pills, not dig in the garden, stop shouting at the wireless. That's all. I think I'm calling you for moral support, really. He's going to be a beastly patient and will not do anything he's told. You know what he's like. Poor Grandmama. I expect you're right. Lane felt her anxiety subsiding a little. Surely plenty of old people lived with dodgy hearts. But do you have anyone to help you? You can't manage an obstreperous man like that completely on your own. Oh, I've got Fiona. She's a big strapping girl, and she worked in a field hospital. He'll be no match for her, and she hesitated. Diana is here. Frowning at this hesitation, Lane said, Diana? Her sister was in South Africa. But no, almost 10 years after almost 10 years, she suddenly turned up in Scotland, apparently. I had no idea. Will she be staying long? She's planning to stay at least a couple of months. I hope she won't be bored. I'm afraid we haven't much to entertain her. She's gone off to Aberdeen to visit friends. She didn't write to tell you? Having no idea anymore what would entertain her sister, but thinking ungenerously that giving a lot of trouble to everyone would be most amusing to her, Lane said, Not a word, I'm afraid. Listen, Grandmama, hang up and I will call you back. You mustn't go to this expense. Then you can tell me everything. Before she placed the call, Lane went back into the bedroom and got her dressing gown under the puzzled gaze of Darling, who was now fully awake. He was half sitting with his hands folded on the outside of the covers. The clock next to the bed said 4:12. What's happened? It's Grandmama. Gamp has had some sort of heart attack, but he's going to be all right, she says. More mysterious is that Diana is there after all these years, only she's not, of course. She's no sooner arrived than she's gone herring off to visit her friends. It sounds like a long story. I told her I'd call her back, so I'm suiting up to do that. You can go back to sleep. You're going to call at this time of day? He glanced at the clock. It's lunchtime in Scotland, Lane pointed out. Darling took up his bedside book. I will stay here, alert and potentially helpful. If you faint from dismay or there are any other sort of emergencies, I will be right on hand. Lane smiled and leaned over to kiss him. You are a love. I wouldn't dream of being such a nuisance. It would be the first time then, he called after her as she went back to the hall. Wishing she'd made herself a cup of tea, Lane waited in the hallway for the call to be put through. Finally, there was her grandmother's voice, made slightly hollow and tinny by whatever mechanism made an international call possible. Lanika? All right, now tell me everything. Diana is there, you said. When did she arrive? Yes, well, I mean, she was here. She came for a week or so ago, just when your grandfather was taking a turn for the worse. I think she wanted to stay out of the way, poor dear. Lane was surprised. She may have held jaundiced views about her sister, but she, like Lane, doted on their grandparents. It surprised her that her sister would dash off to visit friends when Gumph was sick. How long will she be away? She could be helpful when he's out of hospital, and you sound a bit worried. No, I mean, not much. It was such a surprise to suddenly see her. She didn't even wire us that she was coming. I wonder if she's all right. How did she seem? Oh, you know Diana, always cheerful and energetic. I almost wonder if all the activity in the house didn't make things worse for Gumph. Perhaps that's not fair. He started showing signs of a dicky heart a couple of years ago. Anyway, she's much like her old self, a little older, of course, and perhaps a bit too thin. I'm not surprised she went off to see friends. This place must seem like a morgue. Lane considered. She had not seen her sister since before the war, when she went off to South Africa, but she'd certainly been someone who liked to be the life of the party. Nursing an invalid, even a beloved grandfather, might not be her cup of tea. Now listen, Grandmama, you have enough to worry about with Gumph coming home. Is there anything you need? No, darling girl. Dr. Mwangi has given us a complete list of instructions, including what he must eat. Broth, lean meat, plenty of vegetables, no drink, no sweets. Not that there's much else on offer with rationing, and he has to go for sedate walks. He's not going to like it much, I'm afraid. Don't let him bully you, her grandmother laughed. The worst of it is that I suppose I'll have to go on his eating regime as well, for solidarity. But what about you, my darling girl? How is your fetching husband? Very fetching. He sends his love. Listen, go get Fiona to make you a slap-up lunch with everything you won't be able to have when Gumph is home. Everything will be fine. You'll see. I'll let you know as soon as I hear anything from your sister. Meanwhile, Darling has gone to work. Good morning, sir, Sergeant O'Brien said as Darling came through the door of the station. He accompanied this with a brisk nod, perhaps the only brisk thing about him. Good morning to you, Darling responded in a way that told O'Brien that if not actually cross, his boss was already exercised over something. You're in early, sir. Darling rejected a deluge of sarcastic remarks and limited himself to, early to bed, early to rise, Sergeant. Anything? No, sir. Your criminal is doubtless late to bed and late to rise. Well, that's something anyway. The telephone jangled and O'Brien answered it. Darling did not wait to hear about it, but went upstairs to his office to contemplate his domestic situation. He hung his hat up and saw the file he'd left out as a reminder to complete his notes about a disturbance he'd gone out on the day before. He sat down and shook his head at the file. It had been an older couple in their 60s. The shouting that had progressed to loud banging had finally caused the neighbor to call the police. She'd been afraid someone was going to get hurt. Darling had arrived to find the dispute mostly over. The husband was sullenly standing out on the little front porch of the ill-kept house smoking a cigarette. He had a bruise on his cheek. Darling had expected to find the wife in tears inside the house, but she was energetically sweeping up broken crockery, muttering, "Bloody bastard," over and over. She did not stop until he cleared his throat. They always saddened him, these examples of marital disharmony. He thought of what it must have been like when the couples were young and had first fallen in love, a future of seething unhappiness unimaginable to him. The phone rang, interrupting these reflections. Sir, that was a call from across the lake at 6 Mile. Mrs. Arden says her husband is missing. Went out in his boat last night. Boat found this morning, no man. Sergeant Ames just came in. Shall I send him out? No, you can send us both out. I'll be right down. It would be a distraction. And it was interesting. He imagined a rowboat homing like a horse that had lost its rider. There we go.
Oh, that's great. Hang on, I'm going to hit the right button here. Here. Thank you very much. Very fun reading your book. And I love your characters. I mean, first of all, you picked the name Darling, which is it's darling. And so everybody needs to understand that this is a series. This is the 10th in a series of 10.
It
So
is.
it's my first. So I'm just getting to know them. And if you have not read any of these earlier, have no fear, because I know them already and I did not read the earlier books. So, Iona, I'm very happy that you're here. You are my very first historical fiction mystery author that I have interviewed, and I have so many questions. I wanted to know like your inspiration, your research. I know that there was a bluebird nurse in the book, which I sort of kind of knew all about and connected to right away. And the book is written set in 1948, but it addresses both wars. So you're bouncing all over. That's hard work. I don't know if people know that. So after 9 books, how did you decide to write this one? What got you going?
A couple of things got me going, I think. The original stories, right back to A Killer in King's Cove, my first book, which introduces us to Lane. Lane Winslow is really inspired by my mother. My mother was a linguist. She was dazzlingly beautiful. She was crazily adventurous. And just to take a little sidebar, the name Darling, it came because when I was 3 and my brother was about 9, she decided, my father was away being a geologist, that she would hitchhike to Alaska with interstate truck drivers. And so she did. She packed a little bag with some socks and some warm trousers and an evening gown, and she hitchhiked to Alaska. And there she met a very famous ecologist called Frank Fraser Darling. And I always loved that story. So that's where I decided to take Darling's name. So in this particular book, I was intrigued. One of the things that my mother did when she was during the war was that she did some intelligence work for the British government. So when she was 86 and really only a year out from her death, she told me about this. And I was completely surprised. I knew that my grandfather had been a spy, and recently learned that his brothers had all worked for MI6 as well. But I hadn't really known about what she did. And she sort of dismissed it as just a bit of frippery, but I was very, very intrigued by it. And what she told me about it was that she used to get dressed up in very nice little gowns and go off to German officers' parties in South Africa where they lived. This was before South Africa joined the war. And because she spoke perfect German, she passed herself off as a German girl and would collect what she could that might be of interest to, the British there who were keeping an eye on the Germans with the war coming up. And so I began to do a lot of reading about South Africa during the war. And, my father flew for the South African Air Force. He was a bomber pilot, and my mother stayed back. And knowing her, even though she didn't say much more, I'm pretty sure she was more involved than she said. And, somebody once asked me on a radio program, well, what did you learn about your grandfather's spying? And I said, they were spies, not much. And that really is the case. And you know certainly yourself that they were kept from talking. And many people really took their secrets to the grave or didn't begin to talk until just recently and just before they died. So I was very intrigued by that. And so, and the other thing about this book is that my mother and her sister had a terrible relationship. My mother and her father had a terrible relationship. And in fact, I think he was a bit responsible for how bad things were between her and her sister. So I've introduced Lane's father several times in the books. My own grandfather, my mother's father, died in 1943, before I was born, obviously, having been arrested by occupying Nazis in Riga and basically killed and left to die on the street. And so I just decided, I had introduced Diana once or twice in books. And when I've been out on events, people have said, well, what's going on with Diana and her sister? So I thought, well, this will be the book when we have a look at that, right? So I assigned the spying in South Africa to Diana's sister, as opposed to Lane, who's the older sister and had engaged in my stories in the work with the agency in Europe. So that was really the inspiration for this book. I wanted to look at the sister relationship, and I wanted to imagine what that kind of work would have been like in South Africa.
Fascinating. And you have all the different time periods in there. Was it difficult to be able to do the research, slot everything just where it should go? Sometimes I have trouble figuring out.
I've become used to it because really, when I set out to write mysteries, I don't write them in the modern day. Obviously, I set them in just after the war, just at the end of the war. And my idea, I think, which was unconscious at first, but really has become a pattern in my books, is that if you want to know, and the whole point about writing mysteries is that you need to give the readers enough that they can begin to speculate about who did it, right? And so they're picking up clues that you're leaving. So I tend not to leave too many material clues. What I leave is human relationship clues. So typically what I will do is I will go back in a period of time and just give a scene that shows one of the principals in the book having something happen, either 20 years before or 30 or during the war, and even in one book going back into the late 1880s. And so what the reader does from that is goes, oh, this happened. That must be important. I'm going to carry that information with me forward. And one of the reasons I like to do that is I don't really like explanations in books, the kind of, 2 years before he'd done this and that had happened. I'd rather just show you that scene and move on. So that's kind of how I do it. So now really, I'm hoping that for most people, the scenes come just about when they need them. So I start this book in 1917 with that prologue. So you already know that something's going to be happening there.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you all about writing mysteries because I just wrote, okay, first off, I wanted to say the book that I have coming out next includes the oath of secrecy. So I know exactly what you were talking about with your spies. And I also tried to build in a little mystery, but I don't know. I have no idea what I'm doing with mystery writing. So you're planting these human emotional experience clues all along, but how do you write it as an author? Like, is everything planned out perfectly in advance, or because I have no idea what I'm doing when I'm writing. I just let it all out. So, but I would imagine with all the details you would have to do, you've got to be a detailed planner. Am I right?
No, and you are a sister in terms of writing. I'm sure you've heard this, and anyone listening will have heard this. Among mystery writers are famously either plotters, so they plot completely. So someone like Elizabeth George, for example, who writes massive, very complex books, she plots everything down to the last detail. Or they're what's called pantsers, which is flying by the seat of their pants. And I'm definitely a pantser. I never liked outlining. I never taught my kids in school when I was a teacher to outline because I think it limits thinking and it limits what is possible on the page. So that's my excuse. But in reality, I just don't do it. So what happens as I go along, and by the way, if you want to write a mystery, Genevieve, you just have to kill someone off in your book and you're on your way.
Oh, I do that all the time.
Well, there you are. So that's what happens, and I very often, pantsers do get in trouble because they get gnarled up and have to stop and kind of unravel things and see where things are going. But some famous pantsers are Ian Rankin and Donna Leon and Anne Cleves. These are all pantsers, who just write and see where things are going. Of course, every pantser has to then, as I said, reach the point where, I need to, where's this going to go? And at that point, you have to start thinking. But, I said, I'm sort of old now. It's been 10 years since I started. I started my first book at 64. And I just, I want to amuse myself a little bit, right? So typically what I'll do is write a death scene and then have no idea who the dead guy is or woman or what's happened. And the writing process will be discovering that, right? And sometimes the way the person has died is very inconvenient and very hard to explain. So I spend quite a bit of sort of time thinking, well, how would something like that have happened? So that's all part of the process as I'm writing, because it amuses me.
That's so neat. Wow, that's a whole different perspective. I'm going to try that. Even just for a little exercise, I'm going to try that out. And yeah, that's okay. But the reason I was confused about that one is because by the end, and I know you've answered this, but I'm still whirling in my head, all the little ends that you have to tie in, and you don't write just one body. You've got in this book, there are a number of bodies. And so there's a number of odds and ends that are left. I would lose track of all those strings. Do you at least keep a notepad beside you to remember details, or?
I begin to eventually. I have a wonderful beta reader who will, she is famously not a yes man at all. Like she'll read it and she'll go, I'm very surprised that the inspector didn't ask this question. And I'll go, oh my God, of course he should have. What was I thinking? And then she'll say, oh, what happened to this? You mentioned this in the book. And I've sort of gone through it and I don't see where anything comes of that. And of course, again, there are some kind of, they're written even rules going back to the 1920s about writing mysteries. And, you don't bring something in unless you're going to do something with it. It's the old, don't hang a gun on the wall unless you're going to use it sometime in the book. So, she's very good at that. So that's quite helpful. And, I just have to say, and I haven't said it before, but I'd like to say it now, that no book, and you'll know this, Genevieve, is really done just by you. The editors, the beta readers, like everybody is there wanting to make this a great book. So if you've dropped something or you haven't, explain something or whatever, there's going to be someone there in that team who's going to help you do that. Now, all of the tying up of things at the end comes a little bit out of my philosophy about why people are killed. Wow. And I think, I don't write thrillers where, it's a serial killer who has no particular motivation that I care to relate to. I think people die because people get confused about what they should do right now and feel blocked in or painted into a corner, personally, or because of something that happened in the past. There's something going on between those two that is eventually going to culminate in somebody dying. So that's kind of how I approach it. So that's why as I go along, I think, aha, no wonder this man has died. Or no wonder we haven't heard about the mysterious missing wife. As I'm writing, those things become clear to me.
Oh, that's so great. Yes, I believe my next book will have to include a mystery a little deeper than what I've been trying to do. I wanted to comment also, and I do have this ugly red line across it. All of your books, the cover art.
Oh, I know.
I love that. They're all similar for readers. They've got such a beautiful retro vintage style. It's representative of 1948 era, right after the war and stuff. Is that an in-house publisher artist that does that?
The artist is wonderful. She's called Margaret Hanson, and she is a sort of consulting artist. And when I wrote my first book, and they said to me, you know, what do we think about the covers? I sent, you know, those wonderful travel posters of Canada from the period, you know, where someone's standing on a hill looking out at some fabulous mountainous view with lakes and Banff or something, you know. And so they thought they had someone who might be able to do that. So they got Margaret to work on that book. And, you know, ever since then, it's been a wonderful kind of relationship. Like Margaret will read the book and say, well, I think we could illustrate this or this or this. You know, what do you think? Sometimes in my head, I already have an illustration that I think is the one I want. You know, a copy of the picture will come, and what do you think? And sometimes I say, I think this ought to maybe happen a little bit. And, you know, this particular cover shows it going into the distance, what's called the Seven Sisters, which is a beautiful coastal walk in England, which my husband and I did last time we were there. And so I set a part of the story at Seven Sisters, and there's lots of wonderful pictures of it. So, you know, it is as stunning as that, you know, and I love the evening because that's when Lane arrives there looking for her sister.
Yeah, I love, they're just very unique. They're very eye-catching. Yeah, they're just, because you can definitely identify which one's of yours. And so all of your books are standalones, right? They kind of weave, Lane and Darling would be sort of woven through as
well, they're definitely a series, and I always thought they would be a series from the very first moment in the first book where Lane is being arrested for murder, and what she notices about the policeman is that his hair is slightly long for what she would consider a policeman. And so I went, as soon as I wrote that, I went, uh-oh. So then I knew, you know, that I would have to continue. So it is a series. And typically what people do is read this because it's the first book they've encountered, and then they rush back to the beginning to read all the rest of them, you know. But they definitely stand alone. I intend them to stand alone.
Yes, that works.
You know, if you can never read any other Lane Winslow book, just read the latest kind of thing, and you decide.
Yeah, that's what I plan to do. I'm taking this one. I wanted to, there's part that I want to reread, and I'm going away on holiday, and I'm going to read it on the beach. So that's my plan. So what's next? Is there another one brewing in your head? How many books in this series do you think?
I don't know, but number 11 is due on the desk of my publisher May 1st. So, and I have already a sprinkling of an idea for the one after that. Good. So, you know,
just keep going.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite enjoyable to write a series because you can see the characters develop over the books, right. And you don't have to meet new people all the time again. But at the same time, there are new people in all my books, and in the one that is just a manuscript right now, you know, there's a character that I'm going, yeah, I think I might want to see her again, you know. But I don't know. I mean, I put a spy in the second book, and a Russian spy that was a pal of her father's, and I didn't intend for him to come back, but he made an appearance in several more books.
I love when the characters speak up and they just tell you, "Hello, I'm in
yes.
this story. You should.
You're not done with me."
Yeah. Hello, pull me in there. I'm very excited because this has taught me that there is a possible way that I could work my way into some little mystery in my next book. So now I'm going to go off and kill somebody this afternoon, I think, and see how that works out. And I appreciate very much all these lessons, all these life lessons as an award-winning principal of a high school, which I cannot even imagine. I feel very grateful that you were able to come here and chat with us. So much teaching in what you say, and I really do appreciate it.
Oh, you're very kind to say so.
Well, thank you very much for coming on here and chatting with me. And I'm planning on everybody out there writing to me and telling me what they think of this book when you're done. So to track a traitor, and it is out now. So there it is. There it is without the ugly red advanced reader copy.
Oh, and the ugly bookmarks. There we go.
It's a pretty thick book, isn't it? It's a pretty thick book. And I was looking at some of your other page numbers and you were a lot less. I think it's, that we were trapped for so long. I think, because I'm in the same boat, that we just got to talk. We just need to talk, get it out.
I think that's right.
Too much to say. Well, again, thank you so much for being here. And I look forward to reading more.
My great pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, you too.
Bye-bye.